Hey, Kirra-lea here. I'm going to do a sand casting tutorial on mixed metal casting. So I'm going to show you how to cast a ring in two metals using the twice cast technique. So we're going to cast a ring in silver first, but we're going to make sure it doesn't fully form. We're going to intentionally make sure it's like a failed casting. And then we're going to go back in and fill that broken part of the silver ring with gold. So we're going to like repair it with gold, like this lush gold band-aid. And hopefully, if everything goes right, I'm going to get some really dynamic, drippy, almost like melted bubblegum look from that gold. So let's get into it.
So this is red clay. Red clay is made by Craig Dabler in the United States. If you can't get your hands on Craig's awesome clay, you can always buy Delft clay, and that's just as good of a clay. All right, and this is my flask. I'm using a flask that came with my Delft clay kit. But when you buy the flask, it doesn't have this hole cut in the side of it. You will have to cut that hole out yourself so that you can do vertical style pouring. Just means you're pouring through the flask instead of through the clay. And for what we're doing today, we'll be pouring through the side of the flask. So we're going to be doing vertical style castings. So having a modified flask or having a flask that has the side pour option is essential. All right, let's just start with our male half first. The male half is the one with the sticky outy lip, and we're going to put that lip down and pack from behind. That first layer of clay, we're going to pack down nice and tight with our thumbs and fingers, and then we're going to put just a big old handful on top of that and compress it with a hammer. And then we're going to scrape off that extra clay because we want to make sure that that surface is flush. There we go. Now I've flipped it back over, lip side up now. The reason why I pack it lip side down is because you're beating that clay with a hammer, and if you're distorting the lip of this flask, then your flask halves won't fit together. But beating on the outside of the flask doesn't matter. It doesn't affect the way that it joins together. So that's why I like to beat it from behind to preserve my lip. Now I'm going to just dust off this section with some talcum powder. You don't have to use talc, you can use corn flour. And this is my ring blank. My partner 3D printed it for me. And let's pop that in. So still want the object, or in this case the ring, in the middle of the flask. Even though you know you are pouring from the side here, you don't want to bring your object really close to that side pour. You need to have room for your sprue and your funnel. So make sure that your ring or your object is in the middle of the flask to give yourself room. Let's press that in about halfway and put the female flask on top, lining up a registration mark right there. Let's put some loose crumbly bits of clay in. Make sure it's all nice and tightly packed around your object. You don't want any crevices, cracks, air bubbles, because that will mean that you'll have like spillage. You'll have extra to clean up. So you want to make sure your clay is nice and tightly compacted. Again, cut off that extra bit of clay. Pull it apart nice and evenly. Don't twist it open. You've got to pull it apart evenly. If you find it's a bit tight, there is this nifty little gap in the flask by design, so that all you have to do is get your tweezers or your ruler and put it in there and just give it a twist. It's like a little magic key. Opens your flask up. There we go. So let's do our sprue hole in our funnel. So thumb mark or finger mark, that's your funnel. Let's do that on both sides. There we go. And let's do our sprue hole. And I like to use a metal straw that's 6 millimeters in diameter. There we go. Let's get this little one out. And let's do a sprue on this side as well. Now it will almost be imperceivable, but you will have distorted that part of your design where you have sprued it. So just get your object and press it back in and tidy it all up so that you crispify your impression. Carefully pull that out again. There we go. If you don't do this, it may result in like a crop circle sort of mark around your sprue. And, cast objects with ringworm don't look very good. So now I have my funnel, my sprue, and my ring impression. I'm not going to put air vents in just yet because I'm going to intentionally block the flow of the metal in this design. I want to make sure it's a failed casting. So I'm just going to get a little bit of clay and I'm going to pack it in. About that much. And I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. You don't want the clay sitting up too proud though, so scrape off anything that's sitting up too high. You still want that clay flush. Otherwise your two flasks won't close up properly. The other thing I'm going for is that where that silver is going to stop here, I want it to be quite rough and gnarly so that when I go back in and pour gold over it, you've got the gnarly silver bits and then the gold flows into that and locks in place and it can't come apart, so you don't have to solder it together. Now let's put some air vents in. Really want to make sure that the metal comes all the way down to here, so let's put air vents in on either side of these little arms. That's it. Close it up and cast. All right, so because the flask is round, it's going to roll away if I don't wedge it between something. So I'm just going to wedge it between these two bricks so that it can't roll away. Now I'm doing a custom made piece. So I'm adding the client's silver and I'm going to add some fresh silver as well. So let's set up our torch, turn the gas on, ignite it, and then add some oxygen. Get nice and hot. Okay, and we're chasing that rolling melt. Means that silver wants to roll around inside of that crucible and stay in one nice big lump. It's not sticking to the edges of that crucible. And that's what I've got there, a wonderful rolling melt. So set yourself up to pour. Rest your crucible against the edge of the flask. Focus your flame on that lip that you're about to pour over and hold it there for a few more heartbeats just to make sure that that metal is molten hot, because as you transferred over, you may have taken the flame off for a few seconds and the silver cools very quickly. So then when you're ready, chuck it down the hole in one quick, concise motion. 1, 2, 3, boom, down the hole. So immediately after casting, the flask and clay are not too hot. Depends if you get spillage. If your silver spills over the side, then your aluminium flask will be quite warm and you'll have to wait. But right now, I can open mine. Woohoo! And I must have got that silver piping hot because those air vents filled really well. I wasn't as good with my mold making as I was hoping, and there is a little bit of cleanup I have to do before I can do the second part. So as I mentioned, a bit of cleanup is required, so let's do that now. I don't have to completely clean this up. I just need to make sure that the sections that the gold is going to go over are cleaned up so that the flow of my gold is not interrupted by sticky uppy bits of silver. One more thing before we move on to the next step, which is the second part of the casting. If you've got black stuff in these joins here, you have to get rid of it. So if you've got burnt clay in that gnarly silver section, you've got to get rid of it because the gold won't be able to fill in that section if the clay is there, because the clay acts as a barrier. So you have to remove it. I'm just using a toothbrush because that's nice and easy and convenient. But use your ultrasonic. That'll shake that dirt free. Fantastic. That seems like a nice clean join. And I think my gold will have a very easy time of getting in there and filling in those cracks. let's do part 2. Right, let's chop off this big lump. I don't have to worry about getting that too low, not at this stage. So let's make the mold again. All right, now this is where it's going to get a little bit different. If I was to place this in right now and pour gold into it, the gold would fill it in and it would be probably a flush sort of look. Maybe the gold wouldn't be able to completely have enough room to flow around. It's going to be a flush look, so the gold will come to just to these points here and it won't go over the silver here. But what I want is I want the gold to have room in this mold to flow over the top of that silver to get that drippy, melted bubblegum look. So the way I achieve that is I get my master and I wiggle it north, south, east, west. And I'm just making this, this impression, a thicker, wider impression. And I can even press it in a little bit deeper too. So I'm just making a slightly chunkier version of this impression. Nice little wiggle, 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 and push it down a little bit. Why not? Could get some interesting drippy things going on. Now I'm going to get the silver ring and I'm going to lay it in the mold. So see how there's a bit of a gap between the clay and the silver? That should allow some room for that gold to flow over the silver ring. We should get some cool looking drips. Let's close it up and open it and make sure that that silver ring is not going to push the clay into the negative space. We need that negative space to be nice and open for all that gold to flow in there unobstructed. Open it up. Oh, other than this tiny little fleck, looks like it is fine. So let us add some air vents. I really want to encourage that gold to shoot down over the silver here, so I'm going to put an air vent down here. And the same for over here. I'm going to put an air vent down here because I really want to encourage that gold to flow over the top of that silver. Fantastic. Well, let's close that up and cast in gold. How exciting. Let's open it up. Wow, look at this big drip going down the arm here. Woohoo! Yeah, all right. So it might be, I might take some of this back here, or it might be I leave it there, but I'll have to do some soldering because I know that that's a flat section. We've got flat on flat. It's not a very good adhesion. So some solder will be required for that spot there. All right. Well, better clean that up and show you guys the finished look, because at the moment you're probably thinking, God, what a hot mess. But trust me, this has amazing potential, and I'll show you really soon.
Hopefully you found that interesting or useful. and you can give it a go at home and see what sort of drippy, melted bubblegum look you get with your mixed metals. Thank you for watching, and like and subscribe. I'll see you next time. Bye.